The gym was my sanctuary, a place where the chaos of the outside world melted away. Every morning, I'd slip into my sneakers, tie my hair back, and head to the one spot that felt like mine, the leg press machine by the panoramic window. The rhythm of the weights, the burn in my thighs, and the early sunlight streaming in grounded me. It was my ritual, a way to reclaim control in a life that often felt like it was slipping through my fingers. I'd plug in my earbuds, let the music drown out everything else, and lose myself in the motion. For weeks, this routine was unshakable. I'd arrive at the same time, claim my machine, and sink into the comfort of familiarity. The gym wasn't just about exercise, it was about carving out a space where I felt strong, focused, and untouchable. The leg press was my throne, the one place where I could push my limits without judgment. I'd watch the sun rise through the window, feeling the world align with each rep. It was perfect until she showed up. She appeared out of nowhere, like a storm rolling in on a clear day. Tall, with a physique that spoke of dedication, she moved through the gym with an effortless confidence that drew eyes. Her leggings hugged her curves, and her crop top revealed a sliver of toned midriff that I couldn't help but notice. She wasn't just fit, she was magnetic, her presence commanding attention without trying. And yet, she always ended up on my leg press, her earbuds in, her focus unbreakable, as if the machine belonged to her. At first, I tried to ignore it. I'd circle the gym, pretending to be interested in other equipment, but my eyes kept drifting back to her. She'd adjust the weights with precision, her movements fluid and deliberate, like a dancer performing a routine. I'd wait, hoping she'd finish quickly, but she lingered, stretching out her sets as if she had all the time in the world. My frustration grew with each passing day. She was invading my space, my routine, my peace. I told myself it was just about the machine. It wasn't personal. But there was something about her that made it hard to look away. The way her hair fell over her shoulder when she leaned forward, the way her lips parted slightly as she exhaled after a heavy set, it stirred something in me I didn't want to admit. I'd catch myself staring, then quickly turn away, annoyed at both her and myself. This was my gym, my machine, my time. Why did she have to make it so complicated? The irritation built slowly, like a pressure I couldn't release. I'd arrive earlier, hoping to beat her to the leg press, but she was always there, as if she knew my schedule. I'd watch her from across the gym, my jaw tightening as she claimed my spot. It wasn't just the machine anymore. It was the way she seemed so unbothered, so unaware of the space she was taking up in my world. I wanted to confront her, to tell her to move, but something held me back. Maybe it was the way her eyes flicked up sometimes, scanning the room, as if she knew I was watching. One morning, I stood by the water cooler, gripping my bottle a little too tightly. She was on the leg press again, her movements steady and rhythmic. I felt a surge of defiance. I wasn't going to let her take my routine without a fight. I straightened my shoulders, took a deep breath, and decided it was time to act. This was my sanctuary, and I was done waiting. I stood by the leg press, my heart pounding louder than the music in my earbuds. She was there as always, her body moving with that infuriating grace as she finished another set. The morning light caught the sheen of sweat on her skin, and for a moment, I forgot why I was so annoyed. I shook it off, focusing on my plan. I wasn't going to let her dominate my space anymore. I took a step closer, my sneakers squeaking faintly on the gym floor. She glanced up as I approached, her eyes locking onto mine with a calm intensity that made my stomach twist. I opened my mouth, ready to ask her to hurry up, but the words caught in my throat. Her gaze wasn't hostile or dismissive. It was curious, almost inviting. She pulled one earbud out, letting it dangle against her chest, and raised an eyebrow. The air between us felt charged, like the moment before a storm breaks. "Can I take it after you?" I managed, my voice steadier than I felt. I stood taller, trying to match her confidence, but my pulse raced under her scrutiny. I expected a quick nod, maybe a curt reply, but instead, she smiled, a slow, warm curve of her lips that softened her sharp features. "Sure," she said, her voice low and smooth, with a hint of playfulness. "I've got a couple more sets, though. Want to work in together?" Her words hung in the air, and I blinked, caught off guard by the offer. Work in together? I hadn't expected that, and part of me wanted to say no, to reclaim my space and walk away. But something made me stay. Maybe it was the way her eyes lingered on me, or the way her fingers brushed her hair back, revealing the curve of her neck. "Okay," I said, surprising myself. She nodded, scooting over to adjust the weights, and I stepped closer, suddenly hyper-aware of her presence, the heat radiating from her body, the faint scent of her citrusy perfume mixed with sweat. We took turns on the machine, and she started talking, her voice cutting through the gym's background noise. She asked about my routine, my favorite exercises, and I found myself answering, drawn into the conversation despite my earlier resolve. Her questions were casual, but her tone was warm, almost teasing, and I caught myself smiling at her comments. She laughed at one of my sarcastic remarks about the gym's crowded hours, and the sound sent a shiver through me. As I finished my set, she leaned against the machine, watching me with an intensity that made my skin prickle. "You've got good form," she said, her eyes flicking down to my legs before meeting mine again. The compliment was simple, but the way she said it felt like more, like she was seeing me, not just my workout. I mumbled a thanks, my cheeks warming, and busied myself with adjusting the weights. When she took her turn, I couldn't help but watch. Her movements were deliberate, each rep showcasing the strength in her frame. I noticed the way her muscles flexed, the way her breath hitched slightly at the peak of each press. My irritation was gone, replaced by something I couldn't name, a pull, a curiosity, a heat that settled low in my chest. She caught me staring as she finished, and instead of looking away, she held my gaze, her lips twitching into a knowing smile. I turned to grab my water bottle, needing a moment to steady myself. The gym felt smaller now, the space between us electric. I didn't know what this was, but it wasn't just about the leg press anymore. She'd invited me into her orbit, and I wasn't sure I wanted to leave. The gym was no longer just my escape. It had become a stage where our silent exchanges played out. Each morning, I found myself scanning the room for her, my heart giving a small jolt when I spotted her by the leg press. Our interactions had settled into a rhythm, brief conversations between sets, shared smiles, and glances that lingered just a second too long. I told myself it was nothing, just camaraderie born from shared space, but the way my pulse quickened when she was near suggested otherwise. The leg press, once my solitary refuge, now felt like a tether drawing us closer. She had a way of making the mundane feel intimate. One day, as we swapped places on the machine, her hand brushed mine while passing me a weight plate. The contact was fleeting, but it sent a spark up my arm, sharp and unexpected. I glanced at her, expecting an apology or a laugh, but she just looked back, her eyes glinting with something unreadable. "Careful," she said, her voice soft but laced with a teasing edge. I murmured something incoherent, my face heating as I focused on the weights, pretending the moment hadn't rattled me. Our talks grew longer, spilling beyond training tips. She told me about her life outside the gym, how she started lifting to quiet the noise in her head after a rough year. Her honesty caught me off guard. I wasn't used to people sharing like that, not with me. I found myself opening up too, telling her about my own struggles, the way the gym was my anchor when everything else felt unsteady. Her attention was unwavering, her eyes locked on mine as I spoke, and I felt seen in a way I hadn't in years. One evening, the gym was quieter than usual, the usual crowd thinning out as the sun dipped low. We were at the water cooler, filling our bottles side by side. Her arm brushed against mine as she reached for the tap, and I froze, hyper aware of the warmth of her skin. She didn't pull away, and neither did I. The air felt thick, charged with an unspoken question. She turned to me, her face closer than it needed to be, and I caught the faintest trace of her breath, minty and warm. "You're always so focused here," she said, her voice low, almost a whisper. "What are you like when you're not lifting weights?" The question was simple, but the way her eyes searched mine made it feel like a challenge. I laughed, trying to deflect, but my voice came out shaky. "Less sweaty, I hope," I said, and she chuckled, the sound wrapping around me like a warm blanket. I noticed the way she stood, one hip cocked, her body relaxed but deliberate, like she knew the effect she had. My gaze drifted to her lips, full and slightly parted, and I wondered what they'd feel like. The thought hit me hard, and I quickly looked away, my heart hammering. She stepped closer, closing the small gap between us, and I felt the heat of her body like a magnet pulling me in. "You should let me find out sometime," she said, her words hanging in the air, heavy with possibility. I couldn't meet her eyes after that. I mumbled something about needing to stretch and walked away, my legs unsteady. But as I moved through my cool-down, I felt her watching me from across the room. Her gaze was a weight I couldn't shake, and part of me didn't want to. The gym, my sanctuary, had become something else entirely, a place where every glance felt like a step towards something I wasn't ready to name. The gym had transformed into a space where every moment felt laced with anticipation. Our routines had synced effortlessly, as if some unspoken agreement had settled between us. I'd arrived to find her already there, her smile greeting me before I even reached the leg press. What started as shared workouts had become something more, a delicate dance of proximity and fleeting touches that left me breathless. I told myself it was just the adrenaline of exercise, but deep down, I knew better. Her presence was a current pulling me under, and I wasn't fighting it anymore. One morning, she offered to spot me on a new exercise, guiding me through a set of lunges. Her hands hovered near my hips, not quite touching, but close enough that I could feel the warmth radiating from her fingers. "Keep your core tight," she said, her voice steady but soft, like she was speaking only to me. I nodded, focusing on the movement, but my mind was on the space between us, the way her breath brushed my ear when she leaned in to correct my form. The gym felt smaller in those moments, the world narrowing to just her and me. Her touch became bolder over time. During a set on the leg press, she adjusted my stance, her hands firm on my knees as she nudged them into place. Her fingers lingered a second longer than necessary, and I caught her eye, seeing a flicker of something that mirrored the heat pooling in my chest. "Better," she said, her lips curving into a half-smile that made my pulse stutter. I tried to focus on the weights, but the memory of her hand stayed with me, branding my skin with a warmth I couldn't shake. We started lingering after workouts, stretching side by side on the mats. She'd lie back, her arms stretched about her head, her top riding up to reveal a sliver of toned stomach. I'd catch myself staring, then quickly look away, hoping she hadn't noticed, but she always did. "You're distracted today," she teased once, propping herself up on her elbows, her eyes glinting with mischief. I laughed it off, but the truth was, she was the distraction, and I was losing the will to pretend otherwise. One evening, the gym was nearly empty, the hum of the air conditioning the only sound besides our breathing. We were at the leg press, taking turns, when she sat down on the bench beside me, closer than usual. Her thigh brushed against mine, and neither of us moved to break the contact. I finished my set, my heart racing from more than just the exercise, and turned to find her watching me. Her gaze was intense, unguarded, and it stripped away any pretense I'd been clinging to. "You're stronger than you look," she said, her voice low, almost a murmur. Her eyes flicked to my lips, then back to my eyes, and the air between us thickened. I wanted to say something clever, but my throat felt tight, my thoughts scattered. She leaned in slightly, her shoulder brushing mine, and I felt the pull of her like gravity. "You're not so bad yourself," I managed, my voice barely above a whisper, and her smile widened, slow and knowing. The moment stretched, heavy with unspoken want. I could smell the faint citrus of her perfume, see the way her chest rose and fell with each breath. My fingers twitched, aching to reach out, to trace the line of her jaw or the curve of her arm. But the gym wasn't the place, not yet. I stood, breaking the spell, and muttered something about needing water. As I walked away, I felt her eyes on my back, and I knew we were teetering on the edge of something neither of us could ignore. The gym had woven us together, but the idea of meeting outside its walls felt like crossing a threshold. One morning, as we lingered by the lockers, she suggested grabbing coffee after our workout. Her tone was casual, but her eyes held a weight that made my stomach flutter. I agreed, trying to sound nonchalant, though my mind was already racing with what this could mean. The thought of seeing her without the buffer of weights and sweat was thrilling and terrifying. I wondered if the spark between us would feel different away from the gym's familiar hum. We met at a small coffee shop a few blocks away, its warm lighting and soft music a stark contrast to the gym's stark fluorescence. She arrived in a fitted sweater and jeans, her hair loose for the first time, framing her face in soft waves. I couldn't help but stare, struck by how different she looked, less like the confident athlete and more like someone I could imagine curling up with. She caught my gaze and smiled, a slow, teasing curve of her lips that made my cheeks warm. I busied myself with the menu, trying to steady my nerves. We sat across from each other, our knees brushing under the narrow table. The contact was accidental at first, but neither of us pulled away. She leaned forward as she spoke, her voice weaving stories about her life, her love for hiking, the way she'd always wanted to travel somewhere wild and untouched. Her words painted vivid pictures, but it was her presence that held me captive. The way her fingers traced the rim of her coffee cup, the way her eyes softened when she laughed. I shared pieces of myself too, surprised by how easy it felt to open up. I told her about my late-night runs when I couldn't sleep, the way music was my escape when life got heavy. She listened with an intensity that made me feel like the only person in the room. Her foot nudged mine under the table, deliberate this time, and I froze, my breath catching. She didn't acknowledge it, just kept talking, but the small gesture sent a wave of heat through me. As the afternoon faded, the conversation slowed, replaced by a quiet that felt alive with possibility. Her hand rested on the table, inches from mine, and I fought the urge to reach for it. The air between us was thick, every glance charged with something unspoken. When she tilted her head, her hair falling over one shoulder, I imagined brushing it back, feeling the warmth of her skin under my fingertips. The thought made my pulse race, and I wondered if she could hear it. We left the coffee shop as dusk settled, the city lights flickering to life. She walked me to my car, our steps slow, as if neither of us wanted the moment to end. At my car door, she stopped, closer than necessary, her body a quiet warmth in the cool evening air. "I'm glad you said yes to coffee," she said, her voice soft, her eyes searching mine. Her hand brushed mine, fingers grazing my knuckles, and the touch was electric, grounding me and setting me adrift all at once. I wanted to say something, to tell her how her presence made my world feel bigger, but words failed me. Instead, I looked at her, really looked, and saw the same longing mirrored in her eyes. She leaned in, her breath warm against my cheek, and then her lips found mine. The kiss was soft at first, tentative, but it deepened quickly, her hand sliding to my waist, pulling me closer. The world fell away, leaving only the taste of her, the press of her body, the quiet promise of more. When we parted, my heart was pounding, my skin alive with the memory of her touch. She smiled, a mix of mischief and warmth, and squeezed my hand before stepping back. "See you at the gym," she said, her voice low, but it felt like an invitation to something far beyond our workouts. I drove home in a daze, the taste of her kiss lingering, knowing nothing would ever be the same. The gym had become more than just a place to train. It was now a space woven with our shared glances and unspoken promises. Each morning, I walked through the doors with a new kind of anticipation, my eyes instinctively searching for her. The leg press, once my solitary refuge, had transformed into a silent monument to the connection we'd built. I no longer saw it as mine alone. It was ours, a starting point for something that felt bigger than either of us. Her presence had changed the rhythm of my days, and I found myself craving the moments we shared, even if they were just fleeting smiles between sets. Our workouts had become a ritual, a delicate balance of focus and distraction. She'd stand close as we took turns on the machines, her voice low as she offered tips or teased me about my playlist. I'd catch myself watching the way her muscles moved under her skin, the strength in her frame both familiar and mesmerizing. When she adjusted my form, her hands firm yet gentle on my shoulders, my breath would catch, and I'd pretend it was just the exertion, but we both knew it wasn't. The air between us hummed with a quiet electricity, a pull I couldn't ignore. One evening, the gym was nearly empty, the usual hum of activity replaced by a stillness that amplified every sound. We were at the leg press, trading sets, when she sat closer than usual, her knee brushing against mine. The contact sent a spark through me, and I glanced at her, finding her eyes already on me, steady and unguarded. She didn't look away, and for a moment the world narrowed to just us, the weights forgotten. "You're getting stronger," she said, her voice soft but weighted, like she was saying more than the words allowed. I mumbled a thanks, my cheeks warming, but her gaze held me, refusing to let me retreat. After our session, we lingered in the locker room, the last stragglers long gone. I was tying my shoelaces, my hands fumbling as I felt her presence behind me. She stepped closer, her fingers grazing my hair, tucking a loose strand behind my ear with a tenderness that made my pulse race. I looked up, and her eyes were dark, searching, filled with something that made my chest tighten. The silence between us was heavy, not with awkwardness, but with the weight of what we both wanted. Her touch lingered, a quiet question in the air. "Want to come to my place?" she asked, her voice barely above a whisper, each word deliberate. My heart stuttered, but there was no hesitation in me. I nodded, unable to trust my voice, and her lips curved into a small, knowing smile. We left the gym together, the cool night air a sharp contrast to the heat building inside me. The walk to her car was quiet, but her hand brushed mine as we moved, a fleeting touch that felt like a promise. I followed her lead, my mind racing with the possibilities of what lay ahead. Her apartment was warm, softly lit, with the faint scent of coffee and something floral. The door clicked shut behind us, and the world outside ceased to exist. She turned to me, her eyes locking onto mine, and without a word, she closed the distance between us. Her hand found mine, her fingers intertwining with a confidence that made my knees weak. I felt the warmth of her skin, the steady pulse beneath it, and my own heartbeat echoed in response. There was no need for words. The air was thick with everything we hadn't said. She leaned in, her breath brushing my cheek, and then her lips met mine. The kiss was slow at first, a gentle exploration, but it deepened quickly, her hands sliding to my waist, pulling me closer. I melted into her, my fingers tracing the curve of her back, feeling the strength I'd admired so many times in the gym. Her skin was soft, but the muscles beneath were firm, a reminder of the power she carried. The kiss was a rhythm we both knew, urgent yet tender, each movement drawing us closer until there was no space left between us. We moved to her bedroom, our clothes falling away like afterthoughts. Her touch was everywhere, on my shoulders, my hips, my face, each caress igniting a fire I hadn't known was there. I explored her in return, my hands mapping the lines of her body, memorizing the way she felt under my fingertips. Her breath hitched when I brushed the curve of her neck, and the sound sent a thrill through me. Every kiss, every touch was a conversation without words, a give and take that felt as natural as breathing. The room was filled with the quiet sounds of us, our breaths, our soft gasps, the rustle of sheets. Her hands were sure, guiding me with the same confidence she brought to the gym, but there was a softness too, a care that made my heart ache. I lost myself in her, in the way our bodies moved together, in the heat and the closeness that felt like it could consume us both. Time slipped away, the world outside irrelevant as we found a rhythm that was ours alone. Afterward, we lay tangled together, her arm draped across my waist, her breath warm against my shoulder. The silence was comfortable, filled with the afterglow of what we'd shared. I traced lazy patterns on her skin, marveling at how something so new could feel so familiar. She shifted, her lips brushing my forehead, and I felt a quiet certainty settle over me. This wasn't just a moment, it was a beginning. The gym, the leg press, the mornings we'd spent circling each other, it all led here. That machine wasn't just mine anymore. It was a spark that had ignited something deeper. As I closed my eyes, her heartbeat steady against mine, I knew our story was just starting. Each glance, each touch, each shared moment in the gym would carry this new weight, a promise of more to come. And I couldn't wait to see where it would take us.